Welcome to Be Well. I'm your host, Dr. Candace Norcott, and I'm so glad you're here. Every week on Be Well, we take some time to talk about an issue that's shaping our mental health, how it affects you, your community, and the way we all show up in the world. First, I'll introduce the topic, and then I'll bring in a guest to help us dig deeper into the how and why behind what we're feeling, and most importantly, how we can reframe it so we can move towards healing, thriving, and collective success. Finally, before we wrap, I'll offer some practical tips and reflections and strategies, the same ones that I often use with the people I work with, so that you can bring these ideas into your real everyday life. Remember, Be Well is not a replacement for your own therapy. However, I hope it can be a conversation starter when your therapist asks you, where should we begin? With that, let's unpack today's topic. Today we're talking about better aging in Chicago. What does it mean to age well, particularly in a city like Chicago? The concept of better aging varies from person to person. For some, it centers on maintaining physical health and independence. For others, it's about staying mentally sharp, remaining connected to a sense of purpose, and feeling engaged in community. Research and lived experience consistently shows that aging well is not solely about the number of years lived, but about the quality and meaning found within those years. This topic is closely tied to the issue that we discussed in our very first episode, loneliness. We explored how loneliness is not just about being physically alone, but about feeling disconnected or unseen. For many older adults, especially those living in urban settings like Chicago, these feelings are common and at times persistent. Recent national data indicates that approximately 1 in 4 adults over the age of 65 is socially isolated. This number can be even higher in certain neighborhoods where access to services like transportation and technology is limited. Although public discourse on aging often focuses on physical health, mobility, memory, we have to acknowledge that social and emotional well-being are equally critical to overall health. Chicago provides a dynamic environment for aging, but also presents complex challenges. Many of our neighborhoods are rich in culture and tradition, where elders are respected as sources of wisdom and leadership. At the same time, those structural inequities, including economic disparity, neighborhood disinvestment, and gaps in digital access, can make it more difficult for older adults to stay connected, supported, and active. Let's layer in how society frames aging. It's often seen as just a period of decline rather than a stage of continued growth. Older adults are frequently excluded from communal conversations about planning issues like public spaces. This lack of inclusion can send a message that their contributions and presence are no longer valued. And this mindset does not reflect the full truth. In fact, many older adults across Chicago are living vibrant, engaged lives. Some are serving as caregivers to grandchildren. Others are involved in volunteer work, advocacy efforts, faith communities, or continuing education. Many are redefining what later life looks like, finding new routines, new relationships, and new opportunities for meaning. When we look globally, we see striking differences in how aging is experienced. In many East Asian cultures, such as in Japan and South Korea, elders are viewed as central to family and community life. Respect for older generations is embedded into the language and cultural values. And multi-generational households are common. In parts of West Africa and Latin America, elders are considered keepers of wisdom and tradition. Their experiences and insights are sought after and passed down through storytelling and ritual. These cultural practices are not simply gestures of respect. They have measurable effects. In societies where older adults are integrated deeply into the family and community, they often report lower rates of depression and higher life satisfaction. Their roles remain visible and valued, which contributes to their sense of purpose. By contrast, in the United States, many older adults report feeling invisible. While there are examples of multi-generational homes and strong family ties, The broader social structure tends to prioritize independence and productivity, often leaving elders out of view. As we continue today's conversation, we will hold the question, what does it mean to thrive at any age? And how can we create environments that support that goal for everyone, not just the young or the able-bodied? In our next segment, we will hear from someone doing the work of building those environments, supporting older adults as they pursue lives of connection, purpose, and dignity. Stay with us.
This week on In the Arena, I'm joined by the people's politician, Illinois State Senator Mike Simmons. Take a look.
You know, it all starts with the household I grew up in. My mother, as I said earlier, really put a premium on education and learning, knowledge, and understood that that was a path to power, that was a path to liberation, that was a path to self-sufficiency. And so throughout my career, I have always looked for opportunities to build empowerment for communities.
Each week on the Deep Dive segment, we'll take a closer look at an issue or challenge, reframing the way we think about it. We won't just explore the topic, we'll also talk about practical ways you can shift your perspective, whether in your own life or in how you understand someone else's experience. Taking us deeper today, I'm joined by Estrelitta Harmon, Executive Director of the Center for Better Aging at St. Bernard Hospital. Thank you for joining me, Estrelitta.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Norcott.
It's so great to have you. So I want to start just off with the question, what to you is better aging? Like, what does better aging mean to you in the work that you're doing? And what did I miss in the intro that maybe you would say, like, actually, Candace, I think that?
Well, I think, you know, aging is inevitable, but how we age is not. And so to me, better aging is about the quality of that life, right, and how we age. And so it isn't just about physical well-being, but it's also mental, it's also emotional, it's also social, but it's also dignity and joy and independence and purpose. And all of those things, it's complex, it's complicated, and it's different for each individual. But I think there's that personal side, but then there's also that community side that I don't think we talk about a lot. And so for me, better aging is also a society and a community that allows for safety for those individuals as they age and actually pours in and supports all of those things that we just talked about, their physical, mental well-being, all of those things, so that they can age as a whole individual.
Why do those things become so important in our older years? You know, because as we're talking about that, it's like, yeah, that's important for people.
Yes.
But why focus on like this, you know, this age range, or, you know, why are these things important for us as we age?
Well, I think often we look at aging as this extra space that exists after we've done this certain list of things, right? Like after I've had the career and I've had the family, then I will age. But we are consistently aging, right? We're aging today and every day. And so it sounds like it's something that's in this distant future, but we are actively all aging, and our family members and our loved ones are all aging. And so when we start to think about the fact that it's not a moving, you know, it's not a single target, but it's the expansive time as we age, it isn't just something that we do once we reach 65 or retirement. It's something that is a part of our everyday life. And so it becomes complicated when you think about it that way, because it's not just some financial thing that you point to in the future. It's your well-being, it's your family, it's all the other things that come together to actually create the life that you then have at some later point in life.
What are some other misconceptions about aging that you, in your work that you've done, like come across a lot?
There's so many. But, you know, I think to begin, well, I think the conversations about aging are still relatively new. And I think that's for several reasons, but one of them being that, you know, about a century ago, people weren't even living this long, right? They were not living past 65. So 1 in 6 adults now is 65 and older. A century ago, it was 1 in 20. So just the fact that we have, I'm sorry, it was 1 in 4 now. So there's the fact that we have more individuals living longer lives, and now we're having to figure out what that means. What do these individuals contribute to society? What kind of societies support people who live longer? That's a new space, and so while it sounds like we should have that figured out, we're still relatively new as a society in terms of figuring out what happens after 65 for a majority now of these individuals who are living much longer than just a century ago. So I think that that's part of it. But also it's because it's not just physical well-being. It is all of these other things that contribute, and actually it's most of those things, right? 70% of the things outside of our health contributing to that healthcare. So how we age is now impacted by where we live, our zip code, our communities, our education, our income, and all of the other things that shape us, some directly or indirectly, some that we can or cannot control as well.
When you think about the city of Chicago, what are some of those things that are kind of part of our different neighborhoods that impacts how people age in those neighborhoods?
Chicago is just such an interesting city, for us public health folks. I'm a public health person because it is kind of where we look to when we hear the quotes about, zip code being more determinant of your health than your genetic code in some instances. Chicago is that example, right? We know that the life expectancy in Inglewood varies greatly from what you would see in the north suburbs or the north side of Chicago by 20 years in some spaces. And so this is a community where we know that your specific zip code can significantly contribute to your life expectancy, your well-being, and your health overall. But beyond that, then we also add, those 70% of those social things that I'm talking about. So your access to fresh food and produce, your safety, right? Is it a walkable community? Do you have community support? Do you have proximity to specialty or primary care? And while in the city we have many hospitals, someone may live near a hospital or a provider, doesn't necessarily mean that they have access because they may not have insurance, they may not have transportation, or they may live alone. 1 in 3 older adults in Chicago live alone. And so that's higher than the national average. And so what does that mean when we have so many older adults living alone and having to navigate aging in this kind of new space as things are rapidly changing around them? And so Chicago is really unique because we are a vast city, lots of resources. The city of Chicago provides phenomenal resources for older adults. But there has to be that awareness of it, and there also has to be supports for the individual, sometimes in the home and beyond, to really ensure that they're getting connected to the things that they need to thrive as individuals.
I know a lot of older adults' falls are very common, and I think even in my family, the people who are aging have fallen, and their relationship with transportation and walking and distance changes.
Yes.
It just becomes scarier to walk somewhere on your own, to navigate even a short distance.
Yes.
So yeah, that issue of access is really important.
And if you add on to that, that fear then of going outside or, of inclement weather, of falling, is a barrier then to accessing care. And when there are solutions emerging like telehealth, there's options, but that may also be an individual who doesn't have access to broadband internet. That may be an individual who lives alone and doesn't have the skills to have a telehealth visit. So you're now severing that kind of connection or their ability to even access care because of fear that is then kind of piled upon all these other social factors that are preventing them from accessing care.
Yeah, we make a lot of assumptions about how virtual care creates better access for everybody. But if there's that digital divide,
yes,
right, then, I think we all have a family member that we're, let's get on Zoom, let me share screen, and I'll tell you, and we're coaching from, maybe states apart,
yes.
But it really becomes something that we need to be focused on.
Absolutely, and I'll add, it's not even just knowing how to use the device, it's having the device. So they have to have a cell phone or a tablet or a computer. And we know that that's a barrier for many of our individuals who are older in Chicago. We also know that there is an increase in kind of expansive amount of scams and frauds, and that people are specifically targeting older adults. So as they're accessing tablets and phones, then we're also working to combat all of the people who are looking to attack them with these fraudulent, scams to trap them into scams. So there's this delicate balance of increasing access, but also understanding that there are barriers and fear, a lot of fear around accessing that technology.
How do you see connection kind of bridging some of those divides, like relationships, intergenerational relationships? Like, where do you see that as coming and, you know, creating some solutions or help in those areas?
Yeah, I think it's essential. One of the things that we already know is that social isolation increases morbidity rates. And so we know that it's as bad, being lonely is as harmful to your health as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. And so when we think about that, we realize that the importance of social connection is more than just a nice to have, it's a need to have. We have to create these communities and these social supports that ensure that older adults are connected. And so, when I think even about the communities that I've lived in on the South Side, it's important to know that older adults' name. It's important to know about their stories. It's important to know what matters to them, not just because they're a neighbor, but because it keeps them connected to society and because they have something to offer. That individual has years of life experience. And so if we can bridge that, generational gap, we can learn from older adults as they age and gain that wealth of experience that they've accumulated over their life. But also we can support them in ways that will keep them connected, healthy, and whole. And even support that digital gap as well. You have someone to actually call when you have a question about how to FaceTime or how to text or things of that sort. So it's essential, I think, to a model, and systems have to be designed to create that intentionally. We have to think about it on the employer side, right? Are we hiring and recruiting across generations? And also in the social setting, are we providing services and resources and programs that are reflective of the entire community and not just specific demographic?
I want to hear more about the work you're doing, but before that, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the role of language. I feel like narrative and our storytelling and how we talk about aging impacts how we feel about aging and how we feel about older people.
Yes.
You've been doing this work for a while, and what do you just hear as you're out in your world, in your life? What are the things you hear that you're like, I wish people would just change the way they talk about that, ...
Yes, I would say that there tends to be a divide between what younger individuals think, they fear aging, right? As opposed to the older adults that I engage with on a regular basis who are thriving, who, no matter what their physical state may be, are glamorous, are excited about the wealth of things that they've experienced, have stories to tell, are connected to their churches or their communities or their families or want to be. And so I think that there's an interesting kind of paradigm where when you speak to older adults, they have so much to offer and so much to tell, but yet there is still in society such a great fear of aging, of being seen as fragile or no longer useful to society, when we know that that is not the case, that there are lots of thriving, successful contributors who are not fragile, who are absolutely doing well and are engaged and want to be engaged.
And I think so often people tongue-in-cheek will say like, oh, I'm so old, I can't stay out past 9, or I'm so old. And I may or may not have said something like that. So
Yes.
The fingers are pointing back to me as I'm pointing. But I do see that as just slowly chipping away at just the way we feel about elders or getting older. It's, even though it's a joke or something said tongue-in-cheek, it actually is kind of harmful because we're equating it with something that's negative.
Yes, I agree. And I have the benefit of being in a family that actually celebrates aging. They love to say their age. They love to kind of promote how beautiful it is to get older. It is a privilege. I think we need to be reminded that to live longer years and a longer life is a privilege that many are not afforded. And so there is this sense that there is something to be afraid of, that there's this disconnection, but it is because we frame it that way. We frame it as, once you turn a certain age, you must leave the workforce and sit at home. And that's not the case. Many people are unretiring, right? They're moving back into the workforce, or we know that people are fully enjoying that life after they leave the workforce. But either way, however people are choosing to live, it isn't something to be afraid of. We will all get there, right? We're all aging. And we'll want a society that then supports us once we reach that age.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you tell a little bit about your work that you're doing at the Center for Better Aging?
Yes. So the Center for Better Aging is a nonprofit. We are essentially a one-stop shop on the south side of Chicago where you can access primary care, specialty care, diagnostics, and we even have an emergency room that is certified as a geriatric emergency department. And all of this is available at St. Bernard Hospital in their ambulatory care center and in their emergency department. And so what that means is that we've created a care system that is actually designed for older adults. We've hired the geriatricians, we've trained the nurses, we've ensured that the hospital and the ambulatory care center where people can access outpatient care is completely ready for the older adults and any of their complex health conditions that they may have. But beyond the clinic, we also support all the other things. Again, the 70% that exists that helps move them towards health and well-being. So we also provide welcome home visits if they were hospitalized to ensure that they're supported in the home. We do home safety checks. You mentioned falls. We do fall prevention in the community. All types of education, wellness, Zumba, educational activities, both virtual and in person. And then on top of that, we do transportation. We connect them to food, housing, utility assistance, all the things that they may need to either access or to utilize to better their well-being. And so it's a really large ecosystem of partners and of clinicians and individuals like myself and our partners across the city of Chicago who are coming together to move the needle on health outcomes for older adults. And when we say older adults, we mean 50 and older. So we know that we can't wait until 65 because, again, as we mentioned in Inglewood, the life expectancy is below 65. It's 62 on average. And so,
Right, so you're not going to wait.
Yes, we can't wait until retirement age or Medicare eligible age to address the health needs. And so we're excited to come into communities. We serve 22 zip codes because we know that it also matters to provide those services where people are at home, and really excited to partner with St. Bernard Hospital, Chicago Commons, Chicago State University, UI Health, and a slew of other community-based organizations and partners to address this model.
The list of partners, I think, shows how it needs to be embedded and how it, aging is just every part of our experience, right? Just all of those partners working together.
Yes. And I think it speaks to, something you mentioned in your opening. It's different for every individual. And so we can't create a one-size-fits-all solution. It needs to be adaptable. It needs to allow for people who would like home care. It needs to allow for people who do utilize the ED as their primary care, right? How do we re-educate? And so we're really focused on creating a solution that isn't just a cookie-cutter solution, but it's designed with older adults in mind and responding to the things that they asked and told us matter to them.
Listening to the community.
Yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Last, I would love to hear, what are your hopes for how Chicago can begin to just do more for this community or even just society, what you just hope?
So many hopes. I hope on the individual level, I hope that in the future, older adults don't fear. They don't fear falling. They don't have to fear their communities, that they can go out and be safe, that they don't fear isolation. And so I really do truly hope that we see kind of this space where older adults are welcome, they're joyful, they're accepted, and they are truly a part of the community and not a separated, isolated group of others, right? That we are all in this community together, and that doesn't separate older adults. So on the individual, I pray for, and I hope that those fears are removed. On the community level, there's a Dr. Linda Freed. She talks about, I hope that we take aging as an opportunity. It isn't something to be afraid of. And so for the city, I really, I hope that we lean in, especially as our population is aging. We're nearing the threshold of 1 in 3 Chicagoans being over the age of 60. What does that mean when we are fearful of aging and yet so much of our society is aging, right? And so we have to then come together as a city to create spaces that are reflective of that demographic shift, of employers that are reflective of that shift, organizations that are aligned in creating whole person care models like Center for Better Aging, because we can't run away from that demographic shift. It is happening, and we need to be prepared, and it isn't anything to fear. It's something to be excited about because it's an opportunity to work better together.
With you working on this, I'm optimistic that those things are going to come for us in Chicago. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much.
On the other side of a short break, we'll wrap up this week's show episode with our closing session. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm financial educator Tamara Durbin. On the season finale of In the Money, we'll be joined by our first ever live studio audience to Ask the Experts, a personal finance Q&A with some of your favorite experts from the season. Join the conversation exclusively on CAN-TV Cable Channel 19 or stream live on cantv.org or on the CAN-TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
I'm so grateful to my friend Estrelitta for being in conversation with me. And if she looks familiar, it's because you may have seen her on an episode of Chicago Noir on CAN-TV. If you haven't seen it, check it out. And just like last week, this is a time where I extend an invitation to you to reflect, to gently investigate. Today, I invite you to reflect on how we as individuals and as a community can contribute to better aging. Because supporting better aging outcomes mean designing cities and systems that allow older adults to remain visible, valued, and connected. In this conversation, we talked about ways to make a difference, like building stronger intergenerational relationships. The good thing about this is that we don't need formal programs or city budgets to begin. We can start with a simple conversation across a dinner table, a phone call, a shared walk. It's these connections that can create bridges that allow wisdom, joy, and support to flow in both directions. We also explored ideas of access to transportation, healthcare, technology, and community. Ask yourself, what would it take to help someone in your life stay connected to what matters most to them as they age? It could be as small as helping an elder neighbor get to an appointment, or as large as advocating for age-inclusive infrastructure in your community. These changes don't just support those who are older today, they will shape the city we will all grow older in. Are you still with me? If so, can I ask you to look a little further inward? Because aging is something many people fear. Our society tends to equate aging with decline, dependence, and invisibility. And because of that fear, we often try to avoid thinking about it altogether. We push aging to the margins. We hide older adults away in our language, our media, even in the way we design public spaces. We make it easier to forget than to engage. Ignoring aging doesn't stop it from happening. It just makes it lonelier. What would happen if we reimagined aging not as something to fear, but as something to prepare for, to respect, and to honor, like Estrelitta said? What would shift if we stopped bracing against it and instead made space for it? Each of us plays a role in shaping the cultural story of aging, from the language we use to the jokes we make and the value we assign. So much of how aging is experienced is influenced by how aging is perceived. We are all aging. The future we're imagining for our older adults is eventually the one we are imagining for ourselves. So what kind of future do you want to grow into? What kind of culture do you want to help build? I know, for one, that I want to work towards a culture that recognizes the beauty, the power, and the possibility that exists at every stage of life. So talk to someone older than you. Ask them what they need. Ask them what brings them joy, and ask yourself how you might be a bridge, not just to help them age better, but to help us all live more connected, more meaningful lives together. That's our time for this week. Keep reflecting, keep asking questions, and most importantly, keep the dialogue going, whether with us, your friends, or within your own community. The conversation doesn't have to end here. Join me at bewell@cantv.org and at Dr. Norcott on Instagram. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into a topic that matters. Until then, take care, stay curious, and be well together.